and I'll give you the key. It's easy. Just keep on hopping, keep on rocking, and don't start stopping. Everything you need just to walk the scene. And if you wanna make it better, you give it to me, I'll grease it. I believe for you, you wouldn't believe what I see in you. So don't stop, don't let the dream drop off. Hold up and make it lovely, make it real, and make it yours. Don't stop.
So, Justin, super excited to have you joining me today as my third part of my 4-part bodybuilding series that I'm doing. If people have been tuning in on the last couple episodes, I kind of broke away from bodybuilding for a bit. I'm still, in a sense, away from there. I'm there, but I'm not. But I had a lot of requests of people being like, "Hey, I want to hear more about bodybuilding and get it back on the show." So I was like, "Okay, I'll do a series for you guys." So, maybe in the future that'll be more. Maybe it'll be less. I think a lot of this is great for the Gen Pop person as well, though, because they can learn some things about the bodybuilding side of things. And we also touch on a lot of mindset and things that we use as tools to get through these processes that we are putting ourselves through. So I think there's a lot of positive things for any person, not just bodybuilders or aspiring bodybuilders. So it could be a show that's great for everybody.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Well, first off, just to get things going, little icebreaker. What's your favorite bodybuilder breakfast? What's your favorite go-to breakfast right now?
It's been this for a very long time, but steak and eggs with like a side of French toast is typically like my off-season breakfast that I'll have if I'm eating out. And I'm pretty particular on that because like if I travel, because I love breakfast, so if I travel and I'm like, I'm gonna go have breakfast at this diner, I make sure I look them up first and make sure on the menu that I can get steak and eggs. Because if they don't have steak and eggs, I'm like, not going.
Nice.
Like I don't like it can be the best place ever, but like that's what I like, and that's because not only that, but it allows me to stay closer to my actual plan. Which even and I've been bodybuilding for 10 years now. So even when I'm out and I'm eating off plan or like at a restaurant, I still just make subconscious choices to stay as close to my plan as I possibly can. And that's a personal choice. Obviously, if it's a free meal and it's a designated free meal, then I don't have to do those things. But that's just something that for me works because not only does it, I know how it digests, but I know how my body responds to it. So it's very predictable.
Yeah, not a lot of variables is always really, really nice.
Right.
I think after you've been tracking food for so long, you can just kind of do it subconsciously and you don't even know it at one point. There's times that I'm sure you're alike where I will go in and calculate what I've done and I'm like, oh, I totally wasn't paying attention to this. And it'll be like almost spot on to where I should be in the first place.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You can like once you've measured rice a few thousand times, you have a pretty good sense of, hey, how much of rice is this? Well, it's probably about this, and I'm usually pretty close.
Absolutely. Well, Justin, IFBB pro bodybuilder and contest prep coach, and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, where should I start? Where would you like me to start? I can go really far back if you want, but where would you like me to start?
Okay, so what got you interested in bodybuilding? I think that's always that's a really good question to ask because we all have our different reasons. And I think you and I are probably similar ages, or you might be much younger than me. I don't know, but you're how old?
29.
Oh yeah, I got a decade on you, bro. Anyway, anyhow, you guys are also young. For me, it was Arnold, right? I was watching the Terminator and I just became freaking obsessed with muscle, right? No social media, no nothing. It was like, oh yeah. And then my neighbor, his girlfriend was a bodybuilder and I was obsessed with her too. And that was back in the days when there wasn't bikini, right? So we've all got a story like that. What's yours?
So my story is that I was actually an athlete my whole life. So all the way up through high school, I played a lot of sports, and I played college football as well. And I remember I was home the summer going into my sophomore year of college, and a buddy of mine was doing the whole IFYM, the if it fits your macros. That was like really popular that summer, and like that time period. So he got like really heavy into it, hired a coach, and he did men's physique, and he did his first show down in White Plains, New York, and which I'm from upstate New York, so it was a few hour drive south. And I went with a couple of my other friends to support him. And I saw that show and I was just like blown away. I was like, this is so cool. I like can't wait to like try this. Like I want to do this when I'm done playing football. So I ended up playing my sophomore year of football, and I had a few concussions that season. And ultimately I just kind of decided like, you know what, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to the NFL. I love football. I've played at that point. I had played, that was my 14th consecutive season of football. So that's, a lot of my life was dedicated to football. You know what I mean? Even through high school, I pretty much stopped playing some of my other sports and just focused on being the best football player I could be, because I knew I wanted to be a collegiate athlete. And I needed something for my competitive outlet when I had to walk away from football, maybe a little prematurely. And for me, getting back in the gym and doing bodybuilding was kind of the very next step. A lot of my friends thought I would get into powerlifting because I was really strong, and I always lifted like a powerlifter. Actually, for my training for football, bench, squat, and deadlift, like we trained like powerlifters to build like explosive power for a sport like football. It's very important. Mm-hmm. And I would have done that had I not hurt my shoulder in college. So I hurt my shoulder, and it never really was 100%. And flat benching then was just never quite the same. I couldn't safely bench heavy weights like I did prior to that. And I just honestly was too afraid to tear my pec. Mm-hmm. So I said, I'm not doing this. I opted for the aesthetic route and went into bodybuilding. Mm-hmm. And that was back in 2015. So I did my first show in 2015. So, 8 years ago now, essentially. Well, it'll be 9 here in a couple of months. But prior to doing my first show, I had started bodybuilding in the gym. Like I switched all my training up. I started focusing more on my nutrition. I started focusing more on how my physique looked, not just solely focused on how I was performing in the gym, like mm-hmm. from a strength perspective. And it took me a while to really like mold myself into having higher endurance to do like repetition work, which is what stimulates hypertrophy. Whereas like I was used to doing like sets of 5, 3, and 1, mm-hmm. And I really had to like learn how to do this differently. So that's really like my story as far as like what got me into it. Was I went to my buddy's show and I immediately was like, I have to do this at some point. And then the stars aligned. I finished that season out, and then I just was like, you know what, I'm done. Mm-hmm. So I finished, and then I jumped right into it.
So was your first contest prep everything that you expected? It was
a disaster. It was a disaster. And like I did my first prep off of macros as well. I did IAFYM, mm-hmm. and because I thought it would be easier to be able to fit food into my plan, because I didn't know how to cook. Mm-hmm. So I had never cooked. I had my parents were always in the kitchen making food for us. They always were very big on our nutrition. My sister and I, my older sister, she was a collegiate athlete as well, and we definitely were well-fed kids. We did not go hungry, but I never learned how to really prepare food for myself. And even in college, I had, the max dining hall pass, whatever, so that way I could just come and go anytime I wanted to. Mm-hmm. Because again, I was a big eater as a kid, being very active playing sports. I was that kid that kind of was always outside playing sports. Mm-hmm. So I just had no idea what I was doing. So I figured that doing, macros would make it easier. But it was a disaster. I didn't know anything of what I was doing. And luckily, like I had a coach, he was just a local guy, but he had some good foundational knowledge and, was able to help me. come into the show and actually look good. I won the novice overall. I won my middleweight class at that time. I weighed like 162 pounds on stage, I think. And I was pretty shredded. I had some striations in my glutes, but not like anything that I've done prior or since then. But yeah, it was kind of a disaster, and I fucked off so much in that in that prep. Like I binged ate so many times. I cheated on my diet so many times, and I had to push the prep back and pick a different show, and it was a disaster. So anyway, I learned my lesson the hard way the first time, and I rebounded terribly after. Did not know how to reverse diet at all. Rebounded horribly, and that was it was just not good. So anyway, that's my story when it comes to like how that first prep went. It taught me all the lessons on how to not be a bodybuilder. So, but they were valuable lessons that I learned at a young age. I was 21 when I did my first show. And so, and that was in October of 2015. I didn't turn 22 until the following April of 2016. So I had a lot of growing up still left to do, and a lot of learning that I had to do. And I still am learning. I'm still doing a lot of growing up as well. But yeah, that was a lot of lessons learned in a very like short period of time.
So then that continues. So then you're like, oh, I want to do this again. So usually it's like I'm going to do it again, or no fucking way am I ever touching this again. Right now, exactly. I do find that's such a different camp, because you'll see some people that get on stage and they never really got lean in the first place. And then they're like, oh, I would maybe do that again. And then they actually get with a different coach or in a different situation, and where they actually have to get peeled, and they can't handle those overpowering cravings and things like that. And then it becomes a really bad like experience for them possibly. So there's a lot of different camps there, but obviously as you got into it, you realized this is a sport that you don't just fool around and get on stage with. Now people do it. I'm a judge. We've all seen them. You've probably been sitting in the crowd. You see these people, and it's unfortunate because the difference in the physiques is just extreme. It's like comparing, especially at the local level, like comparing apples to oranges, essentially. So you kind of learned, it sounds like early on, what not to do, even though you did well. So then that progresses into more preps. Kind of talk about what a good solid bodybuilding prep looks and feels like.
So I'm going to give a generic answer for what it looks like and feels like for me / how I coach people. Because this answer could be very different depending on who you talk to, right? This is a very individualistic sport, and you have to treat it that way as not only a coach, but as an athlete. What works for somebody might not work for you. So what I learned in the process was that conditioning is a threshold, meaning that if you do things right, you should be able to get a little bit leaner each show. And that is something that I have learned. Now, conditioning has always been my thing. Even in my very first show, I was the leanest guy on stage in bodybuilding. And I remember being told that after the show finished. And again, this is my very first experience. I had no clue. You know what I mean? Nothing, didn't know anything. But I knew how to work really, really hard because of all of my training for football. So I just said, okay, I'm just going to lean into my work ethic and just make this happen. So that was, what I did. And then I ended up getting a different coach after that first show. I hired Chris Tuttle. As a registered nutritionist, has a master's degree in nutrition, very smart guy, very popular prep coach. I learned a ton from him, and I was with him for 3 years. From 2016 when I hired him until 2019 when I did USAs with him as well. And Chris and I did some really good work together, and in our off seasons together, as well as in our preps. And we just progressively got a little bit better each time, and a little bit harder and a little bit leaner each time, because we could push that threshold. And that's something that I feel like a lot of people don't understand. You're not going to go from soggy glutes to fully striated glutes in one prep. It takes multiple preps to get to that point, because your body understands thresholds, and you have to basically train it to go beyond that. Just like endurance sports too, there's thresholds. Just like in powerlifting, there's thresholds. You know what I mean? Like your central nervous system needs to be primed to be able to handle the big load that you're going to put on your back. You may have the strength potential to do it right now, but your central nervous system isn't ready to do it now. So you're not going to perform properly. So your body's going to give you signals. It's going to say, nope, don't do this. And you won't be able to perform properly. So a proper contest prep, in my opinion, starts in the off season. And it's where you've had an adequate amount of time to make some substantial changes to your physique. If you're getting on stage every 6 months, every 7 months, 8 months, you're really not giving yourself enough time to make improvements. And here's why. A proper reverse diet starts right after the show. That should be anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks long, in my opinion. And you slowly titrated your food down and your body fat levels down. You have to slowly titrate your food and your body weight and your body fat levels back up slowly. You know what I mean? You are going to gain body fat in your reverse diet. That's fine. That's supposed to do that, but it's at a controlled rate. And so many people don't understand this. And this is a hill that I'm ready to die on, is if you fuck up your reverse diet, you're going to screw yourself in the long run, because you're going to make it significantly harder for you to get lean again. Now, if you nail your reverse diet, prep after prep after prep after prep, you will come to find out that in that 6th, 7th, 8th prep with the right coach, you'll be able to eat way more food, have a lot more refeeds, maybe cheat meals, do way less cardio, use way less fat burners, because your metabolism is just ready to go. And that's the difference. And this is where you really can retrain your metabolism by slowly building food up and keeping you at a baseline level of leanness that's pretty lean and still eating an adequate amount of food. And this is something that people just can't understand. They cannot close their mouth post contest because they don't have that goal anymore. And unfortunately, it ruins them. It ruins them, honestly. The best Olympians, the best bodybuilders in the world, the Olympians, they are locked in year round. And here's the thing, your average bodybuilder that competes at the regional local level just isn't in it like that. And but yet they want the same results, but they're not willing to do the same work. So that's the unfortunate side of it. So, but in a proper off season where you've had adequate amount of time to not only build your caloric intake up, which also builds your metabolic function up, and also have plenty of time to be able to safely grow plenty of tissue. I also think that you should take an adequate amount of time off PEDs before you start your prep. Bodybuilding prep cycles are the more aggressive of the two options. You have your off-season cycles and your prep cycles. Your prep cycle is more aggressive than your off-season cycle. That's what makes sense. If it's the opposite, you're doing something wrong. And so, because you really shouldn't need a ton of drugs in the off-season to grow, right? You know, hard training and adequate amount of food and sleep are going to get you where you need to be. So I like to feed people very aggressively in the beginning of prep. So what I will do is I'll take their baseline calories from the peak off season, and I'll add to that, and that becomes their refeed calories or their refeed day. So as I start bringing them down, maybe I'll make a food reduction and a cardio increase right off the bat, and I might have them do that for 2 weeks, let them come down, see where things go, and then I feed them. And then from there, I'm trying to feed them with a high day as often as I possibly can to keep metabolic function as high as possible. We all know about an adaptive metabolism. So metabolic adaptation is a real thing. If you don't believe in that, then hey, by all means, more power to you, but you're wrong. And so, you know, a downregulated thyroid over a period of time means that your metabolism has adapted to your caloric intake at this point. We know this. This is so wildly proven and backed by blood work that there's really not a camp that you can be in that really disproves this, but I digress. So I like to keep metabolic function as high as possible. And in my most successful preps, I have people eating usually 3 high days a week.
Nice.
And these high days are very aggressively over their baseline calories, like significantly higher. I mean, I've done 750 gram carb days. I've done 1,000 gram carb days. I've done 1,000 gram carb days plus cheat meals. Tony O'Burton, great example. I mean, that I couldn't feed him enough to get his weight to come back up after I really got his metabolism cranking for this past Olympia, where he placed 8th and was he was the most conditioned, hardest, and driest that he's ever been on stage. It was his best look of his career. And that was because we did the prep work ahead of time, keeping his food up as high as possible throughout the prep, getting metabolic function to work for us to get the body fat to come off. So in a perfect storm, that is how we would prep. And that's how I prep. That's how Matt and I have done things now since 2019. We've been able to keep metabolic function very high. My food never really gets all that low. My cardio is relatively low in comparison to most people. I think the most amount of cardio he's ever had me do in a day was 70 minutes, which I know how I coach. That's not that much cardio. I'm not afraid to put people on 2 hours if they need it. You know, I will obviously go opposite directions on that before I just jump to that. But if you have to do that much cardio, then guess what? You just have to do that much cardio. So that would be, in a sense, in a nutshell, how a proper prep would look. You would slowly decrease calories when you feel like, when you need to, when the body weight kind of stops coming down, slowly increase cardio, again, for the same purpose when the body weight stops coming down. But usually every time that I have somebody hit a sticking point, when I make a pull from their baseline diet, I also feed them. So I'll be like, hey, here's your new baseline. I want you to do a high day tomorrow. Start the new baseline the day after the high day. So it's kind of like a rug pull. So it's like, I just fed you. Now your body is like, oh, I got all this food, increased metabolism. I'm starving. And then I pull the calories away. And everyone always tells me this. And this is when I know that we're really on the right track, is after a high day, they're back to a baseline diet. They're like, I'm starving today. And I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what we want. Because guess what? If you're hungry, your body is utilizing food and it's burning through calories. It's burning through glycogen storages. Which as glycogen storages come down, your body looks for other sources of energy. So then body fat gets burned. Okay. So like, because we know that as free floating blood sugar is in your bloodstream, if you have adequate amount of glycogen storages, well, what happens? Insulin is still high because there's blood sugar there's blood sugar floating around. Well, it gets stored as body fat. So we know this is very simple. And so that is, in my opinion, how we hack the metabolism to work for us. And I'll ride that in all the way to the show if I have to. And plenty of people do.
Well, and you brought up a lot of things that also go back to the Gen Pop clients as well, right? How many people do you know? I mean, I don't know that you take on Gen Pop people, but how many people do you know that they don't eat enough? They've been in this chronic dieting state, or maybe and then you add stressful jobs and you add all these things to this, and then you brought on the insulin thing as well, right? These people aren't even running their labs. They're spending hundreds of dollars on like Optavia or these stupid fad diets and stuff. Yet you're asking them, you're like, well, can we look at your blood work and what's been run for your blood work? And they're like, oh, well, I can't spend $300 on that, but they just dropped like 500 on Plexus or some crap like that. Right. And people don't understand, if you are dealing with any form of, I hate the word insulin resistance. That's kind of like it's a hype word right now, but like if you're dealing with any form of high insulin levels in the body, you're going to store more body fat. So lot of these, I think labs have become a really important tool. And like, there's a lot of people against them because they're like, we're not doctors, we shouldn't be telling people this. You hear all these coaches saying this stuff, right? But if you can bring awareness to what's going on in somebody's body, you don't have to play doctor. All you have to do is bring awareness to what is going on, so they understand that they are potentially not set up to lose fat in the first place because of what their body is doing.
Right. Yeah. And, and I hate to use my parents as an example, but I will. And, both of them, same thing. They just don't eat enough, so metabolic function has just not been a priority for a very long time. And my mother is the classic middle-aged woman who doesn't eat enough, specifically enough protein, and wants to like tone up, I hate that word. But they, wants to tone up and look better. And I'm like, Mom, I love that for you. Like, that's awesome. Like, I know you're 61 years old. You'll be 62 in a couple of weeks. Her birthday's in December. And it's like, yeah, that's great, Mom. But like, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And here's why: because we have to build your caloric intake up. There's no way for me to just like hash calories from your plan and have you eating sub 1,000 calories and then do, another 800 calories worth of caloric burn on the Stairmaster. It's like, you're going to get your body to a point where it just shuts down. You know what I mean? Like, a couple of things that I don't agree with is, I believe in insulin resistance. That is a real thing. I don't believe in if a coach tells somebody like, well, we're not doctors, so we shouldn't be, I'd be like, run for the hills,
Yeah.
run the opposite direction of wherever that coach is, because it is our duty as coaches to know how to read blood work, basic blood panels. Not every coach needs to know how to analyze and decipher a Dutch test. That's a specialty. And honestly, not that many people really need them. That's a sales pitch for a lot of clinics, to be perfectly honest. Same with GI maps, or food sensitivity tests. That's bullshit. All that is shit.
Yeah.
It's complete shit. I don't believe in them whatsoever. And the reason why is because there's nothing that supports it. But regardless, getting back on track, blood work, like a fully comprehensive panel that has, a CBC, thyroid, showing me your sex hormones, as well as your cortisol and insulin levels, your iron and ferritin levels, things like this. And then there's obviously very specialty tests. Like, I like to see HbA1c. I think that's a much better marker than fasted blood glucose. I think that cystatin C is significantly better than just looking at basic kidney function or even just basic liver function. GGT is another one that's really good for liver function. So anyway, there's you can get very in depth with blood work, and as you go up the ranks in coaching, most of those coaches will be able to do those things. They'll be able to decipher those. That's important, especially if you're a lifestyle clientele. I seldomly take them, to be honest. I am more niche towards bodybuilding. It's what I enjoy, and it's what I know more of. I do tend to refer them to some of my friends that are more niched into the lifestyle coaching, which is totally fine. I respect the hell out of them, and I think that there's a place for them, and I think that there's a lot of people that actually would benefit greatly from having somebody like that. That's just not really my area of expertise. However, as a bodybuilding coach, I have the abilities to do all of the same things that those coaches are doing that do work with lifestyle people. And there's there's so many issues with like typical Western diets and our approach to fitness. I'll also even argue that the traditional Western medicine and your general physician doesn't know jack shit about reading most of your blood work. You know what I mean? They don't know anything. It's actually really alarming when I hear some of the things that I hear from some of my lifestyle people. And I typically always tell them, I'm like, don't get their opinion, because I don't want it to skew what we're going to do here, because they're going to tell you something that's completely wrong. And then now I have to like completely re-educate you on all of this.
Yeah.
So, because at the end of the day, it's like, hey, you hired me for a reason. It's like, let me just help you.
And even from a fat loss standpoint, so there are it's getting better, like in the bodybuilding industry, the coaches that are looking at and evaluating lab work. And I think that's amazing. How many people still think that it doesn't matter though, which is complete horseshit, because how can you as a coach, if your client isn't primed to lose fat via thyroid optimization, gut optimization, insulin, like all these things, if you don't know that as a coach, how are you going to optimally get fat off of somebody and get them shredded for the stage efficiently too, without losing a ton of muscle mass?
Oh no, I'm a big believer in, and I've collaborated with some of these coaches that are more I call them functional medicine coaches, or fixer-uppers is a term that I use for them too, because they kind of fix a lot of people. They're like, they fix them up. You fix them up, and then they're like, okay, go.
That's what I do. I decided contest prep is not for me, but I'm like, hey, you come to me, I'll tell you who to go to. I know who's great. I work with lots of them, but if you get effed up by another coach, then feel free to come see me and we'll get everything straightened out.
A host of those coaches that I work with, you know what I mean? Because there's a certain response to prep that's kind of a genetic as well, right? So how you respond to PEDs, how your blood work looks after a hard prep is not going to be the same. Like, I'm very fortunate where like I bounce back pretty quickly from prep, no matter really how hard we have to push things. And others are not. Like others, like, and this is how I explain it to all of them, especially my females, because I use this analogy all the time. Women competitors, female competitors are like flowers. Male competitors are like tree stumps. there's a big difference in resiliency, right?
Yeah.
And so they're much more delicate and you have to treat them that way. Now, granted, I am also a believer in the camp of like, hey, by any means necessary, you got to do what you got to do to get the desired look, right? We want to win. That's what we're here for. It's a competition, right? So we don't compete for second place, right? So, but the harder we have to push, if things have to get aggressive, this is a conversation that I like to have is like, hey, the harder we push, the longer your health phase post contest is going to have to be. So that way we can make a conscious choice. It's like, hey, do we want to do this or do we want to just kind of stay on our current plan and see how things go? And, you know, we've done it both ways because I let the athletes tend to decide because I'm like, hey, it's your body. You know, you are using compounds that do come with potentially irreversible side effects. You know, virilization effects with the use of DHT based compounds can be irreversible. We know this. This isn't news. But there's no reward without risk in bodybuilding. And I literally made a story post about this because it's something that I can't stand. So, hey, here's some tea for you guys is I am not one of the coaches in the industry that will ever preach that I am holier than thou. And there are a lot of coaches that will preach that as a marketing tool and they're blatant liars. And here's why. And here's how I know this. I've read their protocols. I've gotten clients from them. My turnover rate is not all that high. I don't really lose a lot of people. I actually cut people from the team more often than somebody leaves on their own accord. And that's just simply due to effort levels. If you're not giving me your best effort, then there's no point in you being here. I'd rather fill your spot with somebody who's going to give me 100%. Even if they're not as genetically gifted. It's like, I'll take the hard worker that's giving me their best, that's not as genetically elite, than the genetically elite person that just I cannot get to do what I need them to do. You know what I mean? It's just more fun. You know what I mean? It's more fun to work with somebody who's going to give you 100%.
100%.
But my point is I don't believe in that holier than thou approach. And I'm a believer in just being transparent. It's like, hey, yes, like I am on the side of things where it's like, I will be as aggressive as I have to be to get you the desired result that you've hired me for. Now, this is an open conversation with the athlete. And that conversation looks different based on the athlete, you know? And at the same time, I will also do everything in my power to make sure that I'm keeping you as safe as I possibly can. So even with us maybe being aggressive, we still have other modalities in place to try and mitigate some of the risks that we're taking, right? So they go hand in hand. I'm also a big believer in dosage and duration. If dosage is going to be high, duration has to be low. If dosage is going to remain relatively low, then duration can be a little higher. We can run that for longer. You're at a significantly less amount of risk. But if acute doses start creeping up and they get pretty high, this is more for the female side of things because men are just very resilient. But it's still the same camp realistically, but this is more so for the female side as I tend to coach. I coach a lot of high level females. Dosage and duration is very important in that it's inversely correlated. You know what I mean? You can't have dosage be high and duration be high. At that point, you're definitely taking risk and will likely see some ramifications of that.
Well, right. And then there's also another huge part to this, Justin, and I don't know where you fall in this camp, but if somebody is just getting started on their fitness journey, that's not the time to be thinking of a lot of these things. It's the time,
of course,
you know, and so this is where so many people get it wrong when they get started is they jump right in and they start doing a bunch of crazy things and they have not optimized everything else within their power. So it's, to me, irresponsible as a coach to be working with someone on some of these things if they haven't covered their bases first, because then when they start to do these things, their health isn't optimized either. So then you're asking for problems right out of the gate.
Of course, and I'm on the same side of the coin as you are when it comes to that. I don't find myself in that situation very often anymore because of what I attract from an athlete's perspective. Obviously, when I was first starting, I did work with a lot of beginners. I put a lot of people on stage for the very first time. I was a lot of people's very first coach. I have since slowly, and I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for the beginning and what I was able to do when I first started. I have swung a little bit more into the more experienced and advanced spectrum.
Correct.
And that came as a result of not only my own bodybuilding, turning pro at one point, competing in a pro show, placing top 5 in a pro show, to then eventually be getting, starting to get more attention from pro clients, signing pro clients. Now I work with a lot of pro clients. I turn a lot of, amateurs pro now as well. So my focus, as well as what my roster has grown to, has shifted. I still, though, if an amateur comes to me, and I'm not the cheapest coach out there. I'm not going to pretend like I am. I charge what I feel like I'm worth.
Right.
I actually charge a little less than what I think I'm worth, if I'm being very blunt. But it's never been about money. It's about making impact. And I'm on record saying that multiple times. And that is another hill that I will die on. It's not about making a lot of money for me. It's about making as much impact as I possibly can.
That's hard. That's why
I keep
though.
myself. It is hard
too.
It is hard.
Sometimes it is hard. And so I recently, and we'll get back to what you were saying in a second here, but like, you want to be available to people and you want to be there to risk mitigation, right? Like, you see what's going wrong in the industry. You want to be available to people to be accessible as a coach.
Right.
So you want to be able to keep yourself affordable, but on the flip side of it, if you don't put yourself at a price point that's respectable, you're not going to get dedicated athletes. So you can't always be accessible to everyone, because some people's discipline when it comes to the amount of skin they have in the game is not great. So that's a side note on that.
Right. And I'll touch on that really quick and then go back to what I was saying. You're going to have to help me remember what exactly I was saying, the point I was making. So I've had these same conversations with Jansen, Matt Jansen, my mentor, who I work for, my current coach, one of my best friends, probably the biggest, most influential person in my life. And basically what we've done at this point with my pricing is kept it in a middle ground by being accessible to those that are dedicated. So meaning, and I've changed up how I do things. I don't take monthly clients anymore. So like, you can't pay monthly with me anymore. That's not an option. I do 3, 4, 6, and 12. I demand skin in the game from a financial perspective. And the reason why is because human beings respond the most to monetary involvement. So a monetary investment into your coach pretty much guarantees I'm going to likely get their best effort. If I'm only ever asking them to just give me like 1 month up front every single time, I'm not going to get their absolute best for the most part. And I've just seen it anecdotally enough times to feel comfortable making that claim. However, I still have my pricing, even still doing the larger, commitments up front, at a point where if you are dedicated to this and bodybuilding is important to you and you've made it your lifestyle, I'm very accessible. Like, I'm very accessible. I know people who I know coaches who don't have half the resume that I have that charge more than me. And sometimes it kind of bothers me. I'm like, man, they're getting that much. And I'm just like, but you know what? That's fine. It is what it is. You can charge 10 grand a month for coaching if you want. You can charge as much as you want. That doesn't mean anyone's paying that. Right. So that's where we stand on it. It's valuing yourself, but still also making sure you're not pricing yourself out to the point where you're missing opportunities to work with good people. Because it's not always just about wins and losses. You know what I mean? Like, some athletes have all the talent in the world, but their attitude sucks. And it makes it hard wanting to really coach them. Yeah. Other guys don't have a shred of talent. None whatsoever. Everything they have is been earned and worked for. But they're the nicest people. They're always positive. They're very gracious and thankful for your time and your energy and what you're putting into them. And they give you their very best effort every single time. Those people are what keep me going. Those are my whys, because they have made it they've made it worthwhile to me by reciprocating my energy and matching it and going above and beyond and doing everything that I could ever ask of them as an athlete. And the result at the end, their placing, their finish is arbitrary. I don't even care. I'm just grateful to have that person on my team and be able to help them and continue to help them year after year after year. I love those types of athletes. And any coach in the industry would say the same thing, regardless of what level they're at, because those people are just downright fun to coach. And I will never change my opinion on that.
Well, and I feel like we kind of make shifts too. I mean, I don't know about you, but if you find those special athletes, you start cutting them breaks, because it's like, listen, I see what you're investing. I appreciate it. It makes our job easier too. So then when you realize that, you're able to kind of also adapt a little bit as needed if you find it necessary.
Absolutely.
On a
I'm
financial.
I know exactly where you're going with that.
Yeah.
I won't, I'm not going to toot my own horn, and brag about all the things that I've done as far in that respect. But I'm very generous, and I've helped a lot of athletes, in hard spots before, and I will continue to always do that. I will always pay it forward. And the reason why is because I had people do that for me when I first started.
Right.
When I hired Chris Tuttle, I was going to school full time, and I was working not full time, but close, like about 35 hours a week, as many hours as I could pretty much get, at a supplement store. Go figure.
Yeah.
And I remember I didn't have enough money to pay him for 1 month of coaching. My account was too low. I didn't have enough. And I remember he cut me some slack. He lowered my price, and he kept it there for the rest of the time that he coached me. And I referred as many people as I could to him as a way to say thank you. And I always gave him my best, and I never was combative with him or anything like that, as a way to say thank you for helping me in that moment. Because there were plenty of times where I could have paid the full price after I started, saving more money and whatnot. But I remember I didn't have enough. And I even had to ask my mother if she would, spot me a couple $100 to be able to pay for coaching, because it was important to me. Not having a coach and not being able to pay him and not having a coach was not an option for me.
Right.
And I remember how I felt in that moment. I felt horrible. And I felt like my dream was dying before it really was getting started, because I'm like, I can't pay. I don't have enough money, and he cut me a break, and that was something I'll never forget. And so I've always tried to do that and pay it forward for people as much as I can. And yeah, like my long-term clients, people who have been with me for years, because I really started coaching in 2017, and I still have some of my OGs from 2017. And they have a pretty sweet deal now.
Yeah.
As a way to say thank you as a way to simply say thank you for your loyalty and for giving me an opportunity when nobody believed in me and I was a nobody. And now that I've built myself into a respectable coach, I'm not going to, act like I'm, on any Mount Rushmore of coaching by any means, but a respectable name, a respectable person, a respectable athlete and coach, that I want to make sure I take care of them.
Well, and those people got to grow with you too. So there's like a lot of benefits to starting with somebody that's just starting out, if they have the drive and the will to learn, and you can definitely grow with your coach. And there's a lot of history
and developed, and relationships take time. Some athletes want that, that like rah camaraderie, like right off the bat. And it's like, hey buddy, it just doesn't work that way. Like, what I mean? Like, we've got to have time to like mesh, and like work out the kinks of our communication, figure each other out, learn what makes each other tick. It happens faster for others and slower for others based off of personality. You know what I mean? It's just like being friends with people. You know what I mean? It's like, well, you're only going to be friends with the people that you connect and mesh well with, right?
Right.
So it's just one and the same. And it's a process. Communication is a process. And for anybody listening that hires a coach, truthfully, give them like 6 months to a year. Don't bail on people super fast. Give anybody that you work with 6 months to a year, because it takes time. The first 3 months that you work with a coach, you're literally just feeling each other out, and like they're learning that whole first 3 to 4 months, and there's a lot to learn. You're a whole ass human being. There's a lot to learn about you. A lot to learn about your body, about your personality, about your emotions, your habits. So, maybe this is me sticking up for the coaches by saying this, but give people a fair chance, you know what I
Mhm.
mean, to figure you out. Some coaches will figure you out faster than others. That
Mhm.
we know that. That's human nature.
Mhm.
But give people a chance,
Yeah.
because you'll be glad that you did, because then you'll be able to develop a relationship. I always go back to this: is Flex Lewis and Neil Hill are the epitome of bodybuilding coaching, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Flex only has ever worked with Neil, in my opinion, from what I understand, as far as his competitive career. He worked with Neil when he was an amateur, and he helped him go pro, and then he helped him turn into Flex Lewis, the philanthropist, the entrepreneur, the
Mhm.
wildly successful bodybuilder and fitness icon that he
Mhm.
is. Not maybe not from a business standpoint, but his business would not have been what it was without their relationship as coach and athlete, and their ability to grow together.
Mhm.
And they are family now at this point.
Mhm.
And that is the epitome of coach athlete relationships that I'm seeking,
Mhm.
and Matt Jansen is seeking,
Mhm.
and that so many of us coaches are seeking
Mhm.
with an athlete. And it has nothing to do with Flex's ability to be the 212 Mr. Olympia, and
Mhm.
it has everything to do with them becoming like this. And there was never a thought that they would not work together ever.
Mhm.
Like the idea of them breaking up wasn't even an option.
Mhm.
That is what true bodybuilding coaching looks like
Mhm.
between a coach and an athlete. That is truthfully what a coach athlete relationship should try and emulate to.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. So let's circle back now, because we got
Yeah, I
headed
know.
down
Let's
a
go back.
rabbit hole. But we were talking about how your entry level is a little, you're not coaching the basics. You're now at a more elite level.
Right.
So now there are more elite protocols in place. And for
Correct.
anybody listening here, I mean, they have to realize, because I have a lot of Gen Pop people here, that when you get into the elite of the elites in any sport, there are drugs involved. And I just literally got back from a huge conference where I sat on every performance enhancing drug panel. I sat on every specialty panel about performance enhancement, and there were people from the NFL there. There were people from pro golf there. There were people from the Olympics there. And so for those of you that think that that doesn't happen, I'm just going to put that out there right now. It's a thing. So
Yeah.
you can be in denial as much as you want, but almost everybody performing at the elite level is enhanced in some way, shape, or form. Sorry to break the news to you. So with that being
Yep.
said, at the level that you're coaching, there is performance enhancement involved. So now you've covered the basics with all of this, and that's when you have to get into risk mitigation as far as making sure that the athlete is taken care of.
Right. Yes. And so there was a point that you made earlier that I'd like to touch on is, when we are working with beginners and they're making that step to utilize PEDs, you made a comment about how, well, this probably shouldn't even be a conversation until they're optimizing all of their other avenues, making sure that they're always on point with their cardio, their nutrition is always on point, their training is on point, and their sleep and recovery is on point.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of progress can be made with just those four things being optimal.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of progress cannot be made with drugs and those not being optimal.
Right.
Now, I will say this, and I hope that this doesn't teach people the wrong habits.
Mm-hmm.
Drugs can erase a lot of bad habits. That's
Mm-hmm.
the unfortunate nature. They do work. We know that. And they can cover up a lot of bad habits. And that's the unfortunate truth of the sport. But when we're working with beginners, as a coach, it's your duty to teach them the ropes.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes first with good habit training and and forming good habits of being able to truly invest in what it means to be a bodybuilder.
Mm-hmm.
Truthfully, what it really means to be a bodybuilder.
Mm-hmm.
I coach a lot of natural athletes as well, bodybuilders. I mean, we've won 4 natural pro cards this year.
Mm-hmm.
Which is phenomenal. Very happy. Every person that I've coached that's natural that has competed this year has won their pro card.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like 4 for 4. We haven't lost yet, which is great. All 4 of those people won the overalls as well. So that's another thing. Great. I'm very proud of my natural athletes. Those guys work their ass off. I'm very, very highly respect those people. I never competed in bodybuilding naturally. I was already enhanced when I got into bodybuilding. So I don't know what that feels like. I've only competed with enhancements and aids. So my more power to these people to literally just do it by their own accord. That's
but
amazing.
On that same note, and I would love to get your input on this, if somebody is just getting into bodybuilding, how many people do you see they get into a whole bunch of stuff that they shouldn't in their first bodybuilding season ever for their first ever show when they don't even know if it's something they want to be committed to or even follow through with, and then they're left with a lot of side effects and problems. So
that was the point that I was actually getting to with the whole making sure we're optimizing all of the other things first before throwing the kitchen sink at them when it comes to like from a protocol standpoint, from a PED protocol standpoint. If we're going to use PEDs and it's someone's very first contest prep, less is more. Utilize some things, but let's like keep some things in our back pocket for maybe down the road when we're like more serious about this, right? And they're more seasoned, especially if this is a beginner that's also young, because not all beginner doesn't necessarily mean young. You can be a 35-year-old beginner, but you can also be a 20-year-old beginner, and that's a big difference. And that's where tempering your expectations, knowing that, hey, like if we're going to use some, we're going to use some aid here from a PED standpoint, but we're only going to use like we're only going to use some things. Like we're not going to just like go full bore into the deep end on this. Like let's temper our expectations. Let's work our ass off. Let's get you in the best shape that you've ever been in. Let's make sure that you look the best you've ever looked. Well, let's temper some expectations here. And controlling expectations is a very big aspect of coaching that I think a lot of people overlook. But to the point that you were making, I'm very much on that side of the fence where it's like, let's break these people into bodybuilding, competition bodybuilding, slowly and conservatively. So that way, because I also believe in this, that the first coach an athlete has and the first contest an athlete has can make or break that person's outlook and experience on bodybuilding for pretty much the rest of their career. So I want to make sure, and I think it's paramount to help these athletes enjoy their first experience and have it be positive and fond memories, while also trying to help them be successful and be happy with their placing. If we can get a win, great. But making sure that it is a good and positive memory and experience for them is very important to me, because that will likely ensure that they're back for a second time. And when you're back for a second time, we can get a little bit better. And then we come back for a third time, we get a little bit better. Remember, we talked about thresholds earlier. We get a little bit better each time that we get on stage. That's the whole point. If we start going this way, something's not working. So that's a camp that I'm very much a believer in, and one that I respect.
Well, so I'm a huge person that loves to dive into the mindset part of things too. So there's a lot of different things that we could talk about here, but you and I think are very similar in the fact that we thrive in the dark places. I used to call it, I was like, I would literally say, that's where I get good, is when things get really hard and they're really complicated and it's hard to push. That's when I'm like, I remember being in contest prep and I could barely walk up the stairs to go upstairs to get on the Stairmaster for an hour, and I would be walking up the stairs and I'd be like, well, fuck, how am I going to do this? And then I would just get on the Stairmaster, start thinking about stepping on stage, think of myself with a sword, start cruising. I would completely ignore all of the signals outside of that. And all that I was tapped into was the end result. And I can't say that I erased that feeling, but I put myself in a place where I could excel in the hardest parts of prep. And people don't realize, they think a lot of this is a walk in the park. They don't realize you have like many people, I mean, everybody's different, right? But many people have overpowering hunger cravings. It's not, when you get lean, most people are hungry, and a lot of people get afraid of being hungry. So when you get lean, you are hungry to the point of where you're walking by food, and sometimes you're like, no, I would never do that, and your hand just wants to go do it for you because your brain's like, F you, I'm putting the override on this right now, you know.
Yeah.
Same thing with like, your sleep turns to crap, you're lean, so you're not feeling great, you might have brain fog. Like, there's a lot of things that are extremely challenging in the end stages of contest prep, and they require extreme discipline to get through them and be successful on the other side.
Yeah. Was there a question in there? Like, what did you want me to say here?
No,
On that?
I was actually more or less getting your input on that, as
Okay.
far as like, you know, making sure that people have an understanding of what it's like to go through this process and step on stage.
Right. Okay, so I'll speak from my personal experiences with this. So, and this is something that I do talk about with my athletes, maybe a little bit later into their career when they've experienced some shows and, like they've either had success or they haven't had success. And usually it's a conversation of, you've got to find something internally that can drive you past what you previously have done.
Mm-hmm.
Your whatever that is for you is going to be individual.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you what to think in those moments. You have to be able to channel that and find it. But explaining that to them and explaining how I like to channel sometimes can help. I'm very audible. Music really gets me, especially in prep, very much so. I listen to very dramatic and emotion evoking music when I train. Everyone thinks that it's like, oh, you listen to like heavy metal, deathcore, like really aggressive. Not really. No, not really. I used to, and I used to lift very angry, and that was something that worked for me for a while. That's not it anymore. I find myself now putting myself in real life scenarios in my head. And the only way to come out of that scenario either victorious or positively is I've got to get underneath this weight and I have to lift it as many times as I possibly can. And if I leave even one rep in the tank, it's over. Like that scenario that I'm living in my head, I'm literally fantasizing, I'm daydreaming. I'm not even in the gym at that moment. I'm in that scenario in my head. And a lot of it, I use my dad as an example a lot. And for whatever reason, it's dark, you know what I mean? And like everybody has their moments in the depths of prep. When you're an advanced level bodybuilder, you're using a fair bit of compounds. There are some of which are very, emotionally evoking. They can make you hyper aggressive. It's whatever. It's just part of the sport. For me though, I try and channel that aggression and that anger into those situations where for me, it's my father. And a common scenario that I put myself in is he's literally dying on his deathbed. And if I get this last rep, he lives. And if I don't get this last rep, he dies. Like, it's kind of fucked up if you think about it, but that's what really drives me. And it's part of it is that I've always wanted to seek his approval. And no matter what I do, I never feel like I had that. Even when he tells me routinely how he's proud of me and that he loves me, I have a great relationship with my father. I didn't always, but we've really worked on it. And I'm very grateful for that. But he just is like, he was just like 10 feet tall when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And like, just worked his ass off. And like, I feel like I've never done anything that like can even compare to how hard he had to work and the obstacles that he had to overcome. and the shit he had to figure out on his own, and he didn't have like the internet or people like to just like tell him what to do. He had to just figure it the fuck out. And so I just use him as an example a lot, and like it's always really helped me get through like those just crazy workouts. Like, because like the craziest workouts I've ever had in my life have always been in prep. You know, I have my headphones on, I'm just like really locked in, and I just go crazy. Like I just lose it in the gym, like mentally. And like anybody that has seen me or trained around me or trained with me in prep knows, like, one, like, don't fuck with me when I'm training, because like I'm not responsible for what happens to you. And but two is that like I'm psycho. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm a crazy person. I'm literally a man possessed in there, and I just train my ass off. And that's the part of this that I love. And I'm actually very much looking forward to being, as much as it seems like sadistic, is getting back into those moments again in April when I start prep again. You know, and those moments won't really fully come into play until much deeper into prep. So probably closer to like July. The show that I'm going to do is end of September. But you know, like end of July, August, September, like those are the dog days of prep. And that's when like you've got to just make sure your performance in the gym stays high. And it's like, hey, whatever it takes, man, like to get that, to lift this weight and to lift it as many times as you possibly can, and to squeak out extra reps that you previously didn't think that you had in you. I mean, because your mind will quit on you 10 times before your body will. And like, if you can trick your body into just not letting your mind quit and actually reaching that point where your body quits on you first, I mean, that's how you elicit, you know, growth, and that's how you really change a physique. And for whatever reason, that's just always been like what I've done well with. And like I do isolate pretty hard in prep. I don't like to leave my house. I don't like to travel, even though I do have to a lot for work because of you know, athlete shows. And I, you know, up to a certain point I still will make sure I'm doing my obligations as a coach. And then after a certain point I do have, you know, to just explain to people I can't travel. I need to focus on my prep as well. And but I isolate. I don't really hang out with a bunch of friends. I just like to stay like in my own world. I stay locked in that way better. I also know that like I also know how I am in prep, and I don't want to subject other people to that. I don't believe prep is an excuse to be a fucking asshole to people. Control your shit. You're an adult. You know, so but I also know myself, and I don't want to subject people to that. I am a pretty short fused individual, just in general. I'm quick to anger, but quick to apologize. I've always been that type of person. I know if I fuck up, I need to apologize, and I usually am very quick to say that because I don't want things to fester. But the darker times of prep, when shit gets hard, is when, for whatever reason, that's just like when I really shine. So.
And I think that's how a lot of elite people really are. I mean, you have to be able to tap into everything when it comes to a prep. And just to reverse on one little thing that we brought up back there, you were saying drugs can erase a lot of bad habits, right? But I feel like if you are at the elite level and you want to be the best of the best, you're not even going to allow that to happen, because you want to make sure that you're utilizing every freaking card that you can in order to be the best that you can when you get on stage. So I feel like when you get to a certain level, the bad habits just have to go away, because I mean, some people are gifted and they can get away with some BS, but for the most part, most of us have to work really freaking hard. And sometimes that involves making sacrifices.
Yeah. And there's levels to elite as well. You know what I mean? Like, you're pretty elite if you're like competitive in like professional shows in the first call at basically any show that you do. Like you're pretty fucking elite. But the elites of the elites are the top 5 at the Olympia across every division. Like, you are truly elite if you're in that spot. And there's not, like you said, there's not a lot of room for error. And I think that that's also a mentality thing. I think there's elite level genetics there, and there's elite level work ethic. And when you have both, that's when you are a perennial top 5 Olympian. And it's rare, you know what I mean? It's very rare. And I think also like, you know, mindset can be similar to work ethic, but it can also be different. You know, I know a lot of people who have really, really elite work ethics, but really weak-minded.
Yeah.
Not, you know, unable to control their emotions and things like that. Phil Heath, you know, is always an easy answer for stuff like this, but take away all of his physical gifts. He had an elite level mindset and an elite level work ethic that I think people commonly overlook just due to his physical gifts. You know, like, yes, his nickname is the gift, you know what I mean? So it's easy to like just put him up into this stratosphere of like, yeah, well, he's like the elites of the elite, like he's the greatest of all time, or he's in that conversation. Okay, but like he didn't get there by mistake. You know what I mean? Nobody ever questions Ronnie Coleman's work ethic because we saw all those training videos, right? Squatting 800 pounds, deadlifting 700 pounds, whatever. You know what I mean? The guy worked a full-time job after winning 2 Olympias still. You know, he was still, it was actually 3 technically, because he was still working for the Arlington Police Department while he was getting ready for his 3rd Mr. Olympia win. But I would argue that him, Dorian, Phil Heath, I mean, anybody who has ever been crowned Mr. Olympia not only has elite level genetics, but has an elite level mindset and elite level work ethic. And those are things that are 100% in your control. 100% in your control. I can't control my genetics. I was born with whatever my parents gave me. Thanks, mom and dad, whether it's good or bad. But I can control my work ethic and I can control my mindset. And for 99.999% of us, there's always room for improvement in those areas.
I
So
hear that.
if you're trying to figure out how to be a better bodybuilder, improve your mindset and improve your work ethic, and you will be a better bodybuilder. I guarantee it.
I mean, even outside of bodybuilding, I think in life in general, any goal that you want, if you improve your mindset and your work ethic, you're going to get there. I mean, I hear that from people all the time. They're like, oh, we wish you are so talented. I hear crazy stuff like, I'm so talented and all that. And I'm like, no, I'm just bullheaded. That's all. Like, I will push to get what I want. And it doesn't matter how crappy my skill is. I'm going to hone that skill until I'm good at it. So
yeah, and another thing you hear commonly in that same family is it must be nice.
Love
and
that.
I hate everything about that statement, because like, yeah, it is nice. Like, yep, you're right, it is nice, but I worked my ass off to get here. It wasn't handed to me. You know, just like if somebody talks about your business, you know what I mean? Anybody, any small business owner, and that's doing well and that's successful. You know, you're your own boss, you make your own money, you make your own hours, you know what I mean? Like, you're in control, right? Especially, and if you're making a really good living, double win-win scenario. And you hear people say, well, it must be nice. Yeah, motherfucker, it is nice. But you know what? I worked for this, because you know what? It wasn't really nice when I pulled 80-hour weeks. You know, it wasn't really nice in 2020 when I joined Camp Jansen with 7 clients. 7. And I probably made $700 a month off of those 7, probably $100 a person. I bet you that was about what I was making. It wasn't very nice when I lost everything when during my divorce, and I had to move to Florida and have to put everything on hold and just completely start over. You know, it wasn't very nice when I quit my job to pursue coaching full time, and, you know, money was still pretty tight. But I believed in myself and I believed in this. And I said, you know what, the only way I'm going to take this from where it's at to where I want it to be is to be all in on it. Those times weren't very nice, but I weathered the storm and got to a point now where I have a triple-digit roster. And from 2020 to the end of 2023. So this is almost to the exact date. It was November 20th of 2020. It is now November 28th of 2023. So almost 3 years and 8 days precisely. I went from 7 to then triple digits. And that has been a labor of love and it is my baby. It is my passion. My passion for coaching burns a little bit stronger than it does for bodybuilding, my own personal bodybuilding. I'll be the first to admit that, but I'm not going to let my personal bodybuilding die, because I have a goal of being one of the very few people who can say that they competed at an Olympia and coached people at an Olympia in the same year. So at the same Olympia, I want to be able to be an Olympian alongside my athletes. That is a goal that I have, and that's one that I think I can achieve in the next couple of years. And I'm very motivated to do that. My goals and aspirations as a professional bodybuilder are actually relatively low. If I can make it to the Olympia one time, I'm good. I've done everything that I ever thought I could do. I've done way more than ever I thought I could do when I first got into this. My aspirations as a coach are much higher. I want to win multiple Olympias. I want to be a guy that can coach any division to an Olympia level physique. That includes bikini. And bikini is pretty dominated by like very, bikini coaches, people who just focus on that. Wellness is kind of getting the same way. But the other divisions, figure, women's physique, women's bodybuilding, men's bodybuilding, classic men's physique, those are wide open. And like a lot of people coach those divisions, and a lot of people coach those divisions all at the same time. And that's something that I want to do. I want to be able to coach every division. I coach pros in every single division besides wheelchair. I don't have any wheelchair bodybuilders. So, but hey, any pro wheelchair bodybuilders that looking for a coach, hit me up.
Yeah, okay, we'll put that out there. APB, it's an APB.
Yeah, but that's where the whole like it must be nice thing just like really, I think anybody who hears that it bothers them, and I think anybody who says that is low-key a hater.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you get it on I even get it with food. I mean, I'm crushing. Well, right now, my coach is trying to push me up to almost 4,000 calories a day.
Yeah, and that's just another thing. It's like, oh, it must be nice. You can eat all this food. Yeah, but it took me 2 years to get to this point.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, okay, well, mofo, I've been reverse
dieting. It ain't always nice having to eat 5,000 calories a day. Either.
It sucks.
I'm not hungry, but I have to do this. So
yeah,
and that's just and unfortunately, it's just ignorance.
Yeah.
But it plays along with what you had mentioned, that like coined statement that you had mentioned as well.
Yeah.
One that we hear a lot, especially in our industry. We hear it a lot in general, but we hear it a lot in our industry as well.
Yeah.
And I think people would be a lot more successful if they focus more on what their own shit is going on and how things are working with their own life and their own bodybuilding than focusing on other people.
Right. Absolutely.
But our sport is based on comparisons, right? So it's kind of difficult to do that. You're forced into this pattern. Comparison is the thief of joy. And I've posted about this before. And unfortunately, our sport is based on comparison. So you have to be able to compartmentalize and separate that and not do it unless you're on stage. The only time that you should be comparing yourself is when you're on stage. And then as soon as you're off stage, go back to focusing on yourself.
Right. Absolutely. So if you could leave anybody with a piece of knowledge today that you want to get out there, what would it be?
Man, I just used comparison as a thief of joy, like right there. That would have been like a perfect sign off. No, I got to come up with something else.
I'm sure you see something.
I have another one, and this is very important. This is one of my most shared and liked posts that I've ever made. And it is about the almighty pro card. I'm not sure if you've obtained your pro card or not. I don't know much about your competition history, but if you haven't, then you know what this feels like. The pro card is not something, and this is in life. I don't really give a shit about the pro card analogy. But if there's something that you're trying to attain to, so for us in bodybuilding as the amateurs, our very first goal is to enter the professional league. So we have to earn our IFBB pro card. If you're not doing everything in your power to act like a pro before you become a pro, then you're missing it. You're missing the whole point. There's a saying of don't dress for the job that you have, dress for the job that you want. That is a euphemism. It's not literally talking about the clothes that you're wearing. That's just an analogy. What it means is conduct yourself in a manner of what you are trying to attain to be. Don't conduct yourself in a manner of what you currently are. So meaning if at some point in your life you want to be the CEO of a company, well, conduct yourself like that and do everything that you think in a normal day that a CEO is doing. And whether you're a custodian or a cashier or whatever, or some entry-level position, don't act like you're an entry-level position. Hold yourself to a higher standard. And that's the same thing with bodybuilding. Is if you're interested in trying to attain a level of greatness, something that pro cards are given out quite a bit these days. Like there's ways to get pro cards. And still, it's only a small fraction of competitors that will ever actually achieve that. There's still way more amateurs out there competing still and trying to attain this than there are pros. So if your goal is to get to that point, well, you need to be doing everything. You need to be acting like a pro, not days, not weeks, not months, but years before you get that pro card. Becoming a pro doesn't start in prep. It doesn't start the moment you get the card on stage. It starts in the years prior. You know what I mean? Laying the foundation, conducting yourself like a pro, acting like a pro, walking like a pro, talking like a pro, holding yourself to a higher level of standards than what people are holding you to. You know, because if you're only just living up to what the standard of that people are holding you up to, you're just meeting expectations. You need to exceed expectations if you want to be excellent. And that goes for people who not only want to go to that level and enter the pro leagues, but want to then get to the Olympia. Okay, well then conduct yourself in a manner in which that you think all of these other Olympians are doing. Use the role models. If it doesn't matter how silly it sounds. If you want to be a figure Olympian, do the same shit and conduct yourself in the manner of that Sid Gillen is doing it. If you want to be an Olympian in open bodybuilding, conduct yourself in the manner that Derek Lunsford and Phil Heath and all of those guys that came before you were doing it. Because guess what? It was their life and they conducted themselves as such for years before they ever got there. And that's the one thing that I feel like we miss way too often in our sport. You don't become Mr. Olympia the day that they raise your hand up, or, you know, the way that Bob Chick announces you as the new Mr. Olympia. You become Mr. Olympia years prior to that through all of the foundation that you're laying, all of the good habits that you're forming, and all of the work, all of the meals that you're not missing, all the hours of sleep that you're not missing, all of the workouts that you're not missing, everything. All of the blood work that you're not missing getting done, all of the, you know, health phases that you're not missing, all of these things, you're conducting yourself like Mr. Olympia years in the making to be able to get to that point. Nobody falls ass backwards into becoming Mr. Olympia.
Right.
Nobody gets there by mistake. And nobody gets there by half-assing it or doing just enough. No, they did everything in excess to be the best that they could be. And I'm not talking about drugs. They did everything that they needed to do, plus some, to ensure as a safety net and as an insurance policy that they would get to that point. Take that same exact method and that same exact ideology into your personal life, your personal endeavors, your business endeavors, anything that you want to be great in, and you will get to that point. It's just a matter of time. So that would be the one life lesson that I would love for people to take away, because I'm proof of that, because I did that with my business and I could not be more grateful for it, more grateful for the opportunities, and more proud of what I've been able to achieve and build for myself. And that's something that I'm very, very proud of. And that's why I work as hard as I work.
I love that. Well, they always say champions aren't made on the day that they get the prize, right? And so I totally love that. Well, so if my listeners of today's podcast want to come find you, how do they do that?
Instagram is my main social media platform. So it's J_Jacoby32. And that's my only Instagram. So it's relatively easy to find me. Justin Jacoby, you'll see it. There's a picture of me on there, and then a bunch of my clients.
Okay. I love that. Website or anything like that?
Our website for Camp Jansen is more coaching related. If you are interested in checking that out, it is camp-jansen.com, where you can learn about myself and the other Camp Jansen coaches as well, if you're interested, or if you're in need of a coach. But also too, you can reach out to any of us on Instagram, as well, as that's pretty much our main modality of marketing and, you know, displaying what we do for a living and who we are as people. My Instagram is not as personal as it once was. It's more business related. But I do share a little bit of my own bodybuilding a bit here, and every once in a while I'll throw in like a personal life picture, but not all that often. But yes, that's the way that you can find us, is typically through Instagram.
Well, Justin, it's been real. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you, Connie. I appreciate it. I had fun. I thank you so much for having me on.